This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Party Loaded. It is episode 195. We are here to chat about everything great in the world of video games, and to join me to do that tonight, my name is Luke Ritalik. We have back, as ever, Christian Paulson Brown. Welcome back, Christian. What's going on?
Good to be here, as always, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm feeling good. Feeling good about this week. Feeling good about tonight. We've got lots of fun stuff to talk about. We're not going to be talking about with Matt, though, because poor bugger's lost his voice, so unfortunately Matt is going to be sitting out tonight. I feel for the guy. Like, he has a job where he has to talk to students all day, every day, and the podcasting thing tonight, and all of that requires a voice which he does not have right now. So yeah, get better soon, mate. Hope to see you back next week. And Adrian is actually out this week for all reasons. He's actually competing in a barbershop quartet competition. So
over in Tasmania, of all places.
That's it. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if it's one competition or, given that it's in Tasmania, it could be a double header. Who knows? Anyway. But joining us tonight instead, we have the fantastic talents of Mr. Brandon Pearce, Minecraft modder extraordinaire and local game dev in Perth, joining us. So welcome, Brandon. Welcome to Party Loaded.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Very happy to be here. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of things in Minecraft modding for like almost 10 years now, and recently joined the game industry. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about all that.
Hell yeah. And of which I've heard you talk a little bit about in the past. So I know you've got some super interesting stories to tell. So that's going to be a good time tonight. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that and more. We'll get to chat about some fun things, some Borderlands 3, some Res Evil 2, I believe, and some fun news. But I think we can kick things off with our guest. So Brandon, we'd like to start by basically digging in to your background and ask you, would you like to give us the abridged version of the Brandon Pearce story? So,
who are you, Brandon Pearce, if that is your real name?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So it's going to be difficult, but I'll try. So essentially what happened was when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I remember that, I've always played games my entire life. I've been obsessed with them. Something has always drawn me to game development and like just games as an entertainment medium. And I remember that my grandmother used to tell me when I was very young, at around 4 or 5 years old, she said I always told her I wanted to make games when I was older. I don't think I understood that. I don't think I really knew what it meant. And I used to say a lot of things, like I used to say, I'm going to write novels when I'm older. But for some reason, the biggest thing and the one that stuck for me was I want to make games. And I remember when I was a little older than that, probably about 6 or 7 years old, I have a younger brother. He's 2 years younger than me, and he's also very interested in game development and always has we work together on some things. And we used to use PowerPoint to create point-and-click adventures.
What, when you were that age? You were using PowerPoint at that age? Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, so we used hyperlinks and a bunch of images off Google and, the clip art and stuff to, try and make a game. We didn't really understand what we were doing, but I remember I was a huge fan of Command & Conquer, still am, and I tried to recreate the first Command & Conquer in PowerPoint, and it was like fine. Yeah, but, that was my first forte into just how can I create an experience? How can I try to make something that is interactive in any sense whatsoever? I didn't know programming. I didn't know about game engines. I don't even think I knew what programming was. I mean, I was too young. I just knew PowerPoint, and I was like, oh, this is a cool free thing that's on Windows, and I just messed around with it all the time, and we did that for 2 years or something, and we just kept trying to get better and better and better. After that,
just so I can get a bit of perspective, do you mind telling us how old you are roughly, just so I can sort of slot you into a generation?
Yeah, sure. I'm 24.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Christian can relate, I'm sure. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, no worries. So after that, I found out through my cousin who didn't really get into game development or anything, but he was really obsessed with like old school RPG games, and he found an application called RPG Maker 2000, and I kind of messed around with that. I created some games with my brother as well. Like we did all of this stuff together. It's something that I've really kind of looked back at in the past couple of years. Kind of just have that perspective that a lot of this journey through becoming a game developer, it actually was kind of side by side with my brother, which is really awesome, honestly.
Cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think we kind of bounced off each other, even though we didn't realize it. Like, we just did it for fun, but, like, later on, I'm kind of realizing that we learned a lot from each other, and we kind of developed, like, a taste for game development together. So that was really, inspiring for me growing up. But yeah, with RPG Maker 2000, that's such a great tool. It was kind of like what Unity was before Unity was a thing, except for creating, RPG games. And it's very similar to Game Maker if you've ever played around with that or heard of that. And I started creating Command and Conquer again with RPG Maker. There's a bit of a trend there. For some reason, I was just really obsessed with recreating games. I never was like, I need to create my own game. I wanted to recreate games, which is very interesting. But that changed.
Like most bands like start as cover bands, right? So it's kind of a similar thing.
Absolutely. I think especially as a kid, you're just inspired by everything around you. You kind of absorb everything like a sponge. So I had a bunch of games that I was obsessed with, and I was like, no, I just want to recreate them. I wasn't really into that creative side yet. I wasn't really thinking about how I can expand it beyond just, copying what I've seen. So after RPG Maker 2000, around about the age of 13, I believe, before that, sorry, this is a tiny bit long. It's not quite a bridge, but these are like the milestones that I've really kind of reflected back on.
You keep hitting interesting points, and we'll stop you when it's getting too long. Don't worry.
No worries. So before that, I worked on Warcraft 3. I had a lot of experience doing map making in Warcraft 3. And, this is back when Dota was just gigantic. And that was very interesting. So my first brilliant idea as probably like 12 or 11 years old, I was like, I'm going to create Warcraft 4. So I tried to create a Warcraft 4 mod. And it was actually, for a very long time, one of the more popular projects that was getting followed in the community. As you might expect, it had too much scope and it had, too many crazy ideas. It never came out. But I learned a lot about creating an experience and working with teams, because I did actually talk to a few people in the community about, like, I actually found a sound artist who I worked with much later on who did a lot of the music for my project, and that was really cool. And I found some model artists and some other people who knew a little bit about the triggers and the scripts that you can do in Warcraft 3. And later I can link that to you guys if you ever want to check it out. But that was probably the first official public project I ever worked on.
Wow.
And yeah, it didn't work, but that was fine. I was very happy for that to not work, because that was my first experience with realizing that you just need to, sometimes make something with low scope. You need to actually make something that's feasible.
Yeah.
And at that point, I always felt like I was too... It sounds weird, but like for me, I always felt like I was dumb. I always felt like I wasn't smart enough to program, because I saw coding and I saw programming, and I thought like, you have to be a genius to do that. And at one point, I was actually at a LAN with my friends, and we did it in this really squished room with 5 people. It was literally one person's bedroom, and we found out about Minecraft. It had only just recently gotten released, and we played for the entire night. It was insane. That game, when I first experienced it, it was just so refreshing for me. I felt like I had so much agency in that game. I felt like everything I was doing was a choice and a journey that I didn't feel in other games. I didn't really ever feel, you play so many single player games and story experience games that you feel like you're kind of, on like a rail. You don't get that choice and that feedback. And Minecraft just gave me something very different. So it was so compelling to me. And I found out at one point that, people were making mods for this game. They were pretty small at the time. It was just things like oh, you can get like dragon pickaxes or obsidian pickaxes and all these
Yeah.
tools and stuff. It was very basic stuff. But I was like, I want to learn that. I want to actually, I've always been tinkering with games my entire life at that point, and I wanted to get into that. But of course, with Minecraft, the only way to mod it, because it's actually, it doesn't have a modding platform. Even now, it still doesn't have a modding platform. All of the code is obfuscated, and the only way that us as modders were able to create mods was deobfuscate it, try to create mappings for it. This is a bit technical, but yeah, you basically got the mappings, you deobfuscated it, and then you would have to edit the code. So you couldn't do it any other way. There wasn't a modding API, there wasn't a scripting API. It was pretty hardcore. But thankfully, there was some tutorials out there that just taught you how to add one item, and I followed it to a T. And I think the first mod that I ever created was editing chickens so that when they died on death, they would drop 9,000 diamonds. Because I was greedy.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So that was like, I was like, oh my god, that's so amazing. And it kind of just spiraled from there. The first mod that I created was a mod called Minecraft Advanced, and it had a bunch of new creatures, had a bunch of new tools. My big thing was I wanted to expand the Nether, so I added like hellhounds and dragons and all these like expansions to that particular part of the game because I felt like it was a bit lacking at the time. And it was still basic though. It was pretty much just using the existing mechanics and going like, oh, let's just add more. And that wasn't really, looking back at it, it's not compelling at all to me. But after that, the big thing was that I was, starting to talk to some modders in IRC, and I kind of brought together a group of people of about three programmers, and I was like, you know what, I want to do something big. I don't want to do just a mod that adds a few items. At this point, there had never been a mod that added a proper new dimension, like the Nether or the End.
But obviously you knew such a thing was possible because the Nether existed, so yeah.
Exactly, but nothing had been done in terms of adding, a mod adding a new dimension. So that was, it was like, let's step up this and let's actually try and create something which, sets a milestone for the community and pushes the boundaries of what mods can do. And I wasn't a good programmer then whatsoever, but because I had such amazing people around me in that IRC community that they were so forgiving and so compassionate and patient. I don't know how I found them, but they really helped me with this project. We worked on it together, and I would say, within that entire first year of just creating the Aether, which was the big dimension mod that I worked on, I learned so much, and that's kind of how I kickstarted programming and kickstarted my career, I would say. So for those who don't know, the Aether is a mod which essentially adds an opposite to the Nether. The Nether is a hellish realm in underground, and the Aether is floating sky islands with flying whales and angelic creatures, air bunnies, and all these crazy wacky creatures. And the biggest part of that entire mod is essentially adding a bit more progression. You have 3 dungeons that you go through. They're tiered. So you go to bronze, silver, and gold, and at the end, you through these dungeons, you get loot, and you get like just more of a sense of progression that I never felt like Minecraft at that time really had, and I felt like I really wanted to add it, so we did, and it was kind of like a dungeon crawler in Minecraft, and I found that really awesome. It was really cool. There's more after that, but I think that's kind of the crux of Kingbdogz, which is my handle.
So how do you feel about that handle now, many, many years later?
Yeah, so Kingbdogz was something that I probably made when I was around 8 years old. It was actually when I was in primary school. I had a few mates of mine we used to play RuneScape back in the day. And one of my friends called me B-Dogs. I don't know why. It was just, my name's Brandon, so he got dog and put B at the front of it.
Yeah, that seems like an Australian thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was I was trying to play RuneScape, and I created an account, and I tried B-Dogs, and, it wouldn't work, obviously. It's too short of a username. So I was like, oh, what can I do? I'll try Kingbdogz. and then that didn't work with an S at the end because someone else had taken it, and then so I put a Z, and that that's the compelling story of my handle. It's I don't know, it's just something that unfortunately when you create these handles at a young age, and then because I also created the Aether and a lot of my projects at also a fairly young age of like 13, a lot of people began to know me as that, and it's never really a point where you can like rebrand yourself. I mean, I could, but I was just like, it's just a handle, and so it's just stuck with it.
Yeah, and in the Minecraft modding community, it certainly seems like there's a lot of people with some pretty interesting handles out there. So you don't necessarily stand out in that regard. Like it's certainly not the weirdest and wackiest one that I've seen, but ironically, it seems like the kind of handle that could, as you say, could be made up by an 8-year-old's kid or a 30-year-old male. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So, the Aether, it's from what I understand, because it's one of the mods that I haven't personally played. You actually had some pretty amazing success with it at that time. Perhaps due to the fact that for what it was a pretty epic project for the Minecraft modding community at that stage. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of things of that nature out there and available. So, you obviously as a fairly young entry into the modding world got a fair bit of attention and notoriety as a result. So how did you kind of handle all that at that age? Was that a pretty scaring and confronting thing to deal with?
It was crazy. I had no idea at the time how to handle not only the success, I guess you would call it, but also just the attention and the expectations to follow up to it. So I actually worked with quite a few YouTubers at the time to promote the mod. Because one of them in particular was a fan of my previous mod, Minecraft Advanced, and this person was actually Paperbat VG. I believe he's still around. He does streaming and stuff, but he actually was like a big Minecraft YouTuber at one stage, and I worked with him to actually let him play the Aether early, kind of like alpha, beta versions, and that just blew up. It got so much attention. And it wasn't just that either. It was also, we actually posted a project page to the Minecraft forums. It was kind of like the unofficial Minecraft forums. But that was really big back in the day. That was like the only way you could kind of communicate with other players and like find servers and all these sort of things. And that, our project page just was crazy. I think it had like 1,000 pages to it. Like, when like you have a thread and it's got like a bunch of the comments and then it's got the pages down the bottom, it had like 1,000 pages.
Wow.
And it was just, I didn't know how to handle it. When we actually when we finally released the mod, we put AdFly, if you've ever heard of that.
No, I assume it's a revenue sort of system.
Yeah. So it's basically like I should have used AdSense, but I didn't. I didn't know what it was back then. But yeah, basically, it's just a link redirect that as you go through it, it shows you an ad, and then you can go to the actual link. So we put that on our download, and we ended up making $6,000 a month.
Wow!
At the time of release.
Nice.
And I was, only like 14 or 15, and of course we split it with each other, so I wasn't getting like a huge amount, but for a kid of my age at that time, I didn't know what to do with it. What I did at the time was just buy a new PC and kind of, get things that can help me with my development. But just the amount of people playing it, and you had like Yogscast playing the mod on their YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You had Captain Sparkles, all of these big YouTuber names, and I felt, to be honest with you, I felt like such a sense of like, so like euphoric, I guess. I don't know how else you would explain it. It was something that my brain couldn't process, so many people experiencing something I worked on. And then also to get that, a little bit of that ad money as well, it made me realize that maybe I have something here that is more than just a hobby. Maybe I can actually do something with my passion. Because I never really expected myself to actually become a game developer. I thought it was fun. And then seeing that, it was like a complete change of mindset. And then beyond that, it was even more scary and intimidating when people wanted us to start updating it or even potentially create new mods that were even better. Because I'd already pushed myself so hard to make this mod like one of the best mods in the community, and then they wanted more. And that's intimidating, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, these days you see, more than ever, perhaps the the level of expectation that exists out there in the games community, and certainly some more of the toxic side of that creeps through when it comes to even indie developers versus some of the AAA releases. People just have these gargantuan expectations occasionally that when they don't get what they want, you just see the worst elements of the games industry just sort of come to the fore. And I would imagine that, without the support of a business to actually handle that kind of side of things, you must have dealt with your share of, toxicity maybe on a different scale at that time. Did you have anything that really kind of wore you down and made you question what you were doing because you felt like you were, kind of dealing with that stuff without support, or was it actually okay? Did you get by without any of that kind of stuff?
Well, it's interesting because I do remember at the time there were moments where I was kind of like it was a bit obsessive, where there was a lot of positive feedback and there was a lot of great comments that were just like so happy about this mod, but I would go out of my way to search for the really negative comments, almost because first of all I couldn't believe that so many people found it amazing, and second of all it was like I was like trying to prove that it was a good project. So I wanted to try and prove that me looking for those negative comments that I couldn't find them. And of course I would find them sometimes, actually many times. And it would kind of get me really down. Like it would actually, I would say after I released the Aether, I went through a pretty bad bout of depression for a long time. Completely got over that, through therapy and a bunch of other strategies, but I feel like it affected my mental health so much, just kind of like dealing with the expectations of my own expectations of me wanting to make this like a really quality project. Beyond
and at
that
age too, right? Like it's not the kind of success that people like young people usually find. Like you haven't had that sort of life experience to have worked through those sorts of emotions before.
Absolutely. And I feel like even in my personal life and my education, I was never like someone who was, I guess, expected of success. So it's not like I had people around me supporting me or trying to give me strategies to deal with something like this. And I'm not saying like, something, even though there were a lot of people playing it, it's not like the biggest thing in the world, but just at the time for me as a person, it was like world changing. It was world changing and world shattering, I would say, in the strangest way, because I felt so happy. But then it was like, I was almost kind of thinking like, is this it? Now what? What do I do now? But yeah, the negative comments got me pretty bad. There was death threats.
Oh wow, yeah.
There were people like they're kids. Let's be honest here. I mean, maybe some of them were adults, but there were a lot of kids who they do what they do, and that's fine. Like I completely understand why people troll and they put negative feedback on projects, but you would get people who would, even as a joke, I guess, like most of them were probably jokes, they would just like say that, oh, I'll kill you if you don't release the next patch at this date. It's kind of like an offhand sort of jokish comment, but like for me at that age, I didn't know what to think. So yeah.
Cool people. Super cool people. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, I guess that kind of leads to the question of what did you do next? Like obviously this led somewhere, and I know that the Aether sort of continued development and sort of morphed into a new form after that point. But timeline wise, we're talking about 2011 here, aren't we? With development of that.
Yeah. So I think it was about a year. I ended up updating the mod with a few patches. We added a few new creatures. We fixed bugs. We were trying to look for ways to just kind of improve the quality of life of the project. But I've always been fairly ambitious with kind of what I want out of these projects, and so I did want to actually create Aether 2, again, probably to prove that I can top myself in a way, and I feel like that was the mentality going into it. I found that this is probably negative looking back at it. I don't think it was the right approach, but regardless, I went into this. I was like, I want to make Aether 2. I want to create a sequel to the original mod and improve upon it. We kind of had to as well, because at that time, we actually released the Aether at the time that Minecraft didn't have multiplayer.
Oh, wow.
It literally did not have multiplayer. So when finally multiplayer came around, it completely change the code base. So we had to rewrite it from scratch. So it was either rewriting the first mod from scratch and then just releasing the same thing, or saying, hey, let's just create the next iteration of this series, I guess, and also get through the whole multiplayer aspect of it. Because it's one thing to just recreate the first mod and make it multiplayer compatible, but it's not designed for multiplayer, because you would go to dungeons, and if you played Aether 1 with multiplayer, if you would go to a dungeon, you would loot it and destroy everything, and then people would just find empty dungeons everywhere on a multiplayer server. I know there's a problem that a lot of Minecraft servers deal with, and their solution is basically you teleport to a random location in the world. But I don't like that solution, because you kind of get the problem of now all your players are spread out and isolated, and they don't really interact as a community. So I wanted to redesign the mod from the ground up with multiplayer in mind, so it actually supported, those systems. And so that's how I started working on Aether 2 at the time.
Nice. So something more of an approach where things are instanced for players so that they don't deplete the community resources or something similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of went for this idea of there were towers that you would go up to, and they had these gigantic dungeon doors, and you could create a party with your friends. You could right click on the dungeon, and you could say, "Hey guys, you want to do this dungeon?" So you'd go in, and it would be an instance dungeon. You go through it together. You get shared loot and shared gold and all that stuff. And the difficulty of the creatures inside would also increase, because that's another thing that Aether 1, if you just put it into multiplayer, it also wouldn't have fair balanced difficulty levels when you have 5 people battling a dungeon which is designed for 1 player. So that's something that we did as well, that it increased the difficulty, had parties and such. And also when you came out of it, of course, other players could go to that dungeon without missing out on that content. And they could all the whole community in that server could stay in a general location without kind of hindering each other in their experience.
Makes sense. Nice. So what would you say sort of in terms of what you've picked up from development on the Aether and the Aether 2, and what you picked up from other people in the modding community as a games developer now, which you can kind of, you've graduated to the point where you can consider yourself to be that. Like what do you see as the big learning flashing bulbs that you've experienced over those years that you've taken forward into, your Brandon of today, essentially?
So from the modding experiences that I had, is what I learned from it. The biggest thing is cutting scope, and not just cutting scope, but I think, so the main thing is cutting scope, but I think it's really thinking about what experience you actually want to create. And I think when I created the first Aether mod, while I'm very passionate about it, something that I got from it later is that I was kind of just creating a mod that I expected people to like, and it wasn't necessarily a mod that I really cherished or a mod that I was super proud of and I would play constantly. So this is something that I actually transitioned a little bit into Aether 2. And I'm not saying this lesson necessarily carries on into game development, in a professional sense, because these are, at the end of the day, they're projects that you work on for free and for fun. If I'm going to be working on a project, a mod that is for free and is, kind of taking up my own personal time, I think what's important is pushing boundaries and thinking about how can I, skill myself up? How can I learn new things? And while, of course, I definitely did that with Aether 1, I definitely, with all of the projects after Aether 1 and Aether 2, I think it was more about, how can I really get something out of this? And so that actually kind of transitioned into when I was working on Aether 2. So this is a bit of a long story. I'm not going to go into the whole thing here, but we released Aether 2 and it didn't do too well.
Right.
At least it did well. It actually got, I think, about 8 million downloads. So it did very well, but compared to Aether 1, which had, orders of magnitude more than that, it was disappointing to me at the time.
Right.
And because I was always, again, trying to prove that I could top the original mod, I found that just didn't work. And we actually went to the drawing board. we wanted to completely redesign the mod from scratch. And we worked on something called Aether 2 Mutation. And this project was me again trying to top myself. And I guess now that I'm kind of talking about this, I think what I would say is that I tried too hard to beat the previous project instead of just trying to create a solid experience with the shortest steps possible.
Mm-hmm.
So with Aether 2, I created this experience that was trying to top Aether 1. Once Aether 2 failed, I tried to recreate it again. And we eventually cancelled it because Aether 2 Mutation because it was just too big in scope. It had so many crazy features. It was trying too hard again to beat the previous project. And so at that point, we had to cancel it. We didn't have the resources. And again, it's a free project that we did in our free time. So when that finally got cancelled, I talked with my team and I wanted to just try to think about how can we actually make a sequel to the original mod that is concise, clear, understands its goals, and isn't trying so hard to just be bigger and better, but is just a solid experience. And so we have been actually working on Aether 2 Highlands, which has reduced scope in a way that we actually understand what our goals are and we know where it's heading. We actually understand, our target. And I think that's something that I've really learned a lot, that I can actually predict how this project is going to get finished, and I can predict what experience I want to create instead of just this kind of abstract idea of I just want to top the previous project. We kind of strayed away from topping the first mod. We don't even think about that anymore. We're just thinking about creating an experience that we really enjoy playing. And when I was creating Aether 2 Highlands, I began creating something called Orbis, which is probably the biggest passion project so far that I've worked on in kind of my modding history. So in Minecraft, the way that they do generation is they have structures. For a long time, these structures, like the villages and stuff, they were actually programmed just with algorithms. Eventually, they were switched over to data-driven structure templates. But the problem is that all of these structures were very static. You kind of they could rotate and stuff, and maybe there'd be some small slight changes here and there. But they didn't have the flexibility to be able to have a lot of procedural content throughout them. And especially with dungeons in Minecraft, they don't have that. They're not as sprawling and elaborate and as detailed as, even for example, maybe a dungeon in Diablo,
Yeah.
It's never felt like that. And we also had the problem of developing Aether 2 Highlands, that we wanted to give our artists the power to be able to actually create these dungeons, because oftentimes, even if we would use structure templates, it didn't have the randomization, it didn't have the procedural generation. And if we went the other way, where we all programmed algorithms to generate these structures, it wouldn't really translate the concept art that they had into something that is actually playable in game. It always felt like there was that barrier and that layer in between. So I wanted to remove that barrier completely. I wanted to make it so the artists could just get in there straight away. They could design structures, they could design dungeons, and they wouldn't have to do any programming whatsoever, while also maintaining procedural elements and making it random. So Orbis was the answer to that. It was a tool that I worked on for about 2 years. And with Orbis, it basically, as explained, it allows you to shape the world. You can create structures in this format called blueprints, and you can actually add procedural elements into it as an artist. You don't have to do any programming whatsoever. And we found that people, our artists in the team, were actually able to create organic structures like trees without any programming. And it was mind-blowing. Something that used to take about, like a dungeon, let's say, it used to take about 3 months to develop. Programming and working with the artists, getting concept art, getting designs. With this now, they would create their designs and concepts, and they could actually create the dungeons in Orbis in about a week.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we were able to just push out so much content so quickly. and we're still working on the content for that now. But just the way we've been able to actually, expand the game in not only just actually creating these dungeons, but giving them so much life and so much randomness and proceduralness, while like maintaining like an art style and a design. Like artists can actually now get into it and design dungeon rooms like with actual proper level design, rather than programmers trying to program in level design into a abstract dungeon room. Like it just doesn't work, and that's why this tool was necessary. So to wrap this whole thing around, what I am really passionate about is, with all the learnings, is not just creating a project that, again, is trying to top something. For me, it was like, now I want to empower my team, and I want to create a product and a project that we're all super proud of and that we actually love playing. And like that is Aether 2 Highlands right now for me. I love this mod and I love this experience, even though it's not trying to top the original mod, even though it's not trying to be the original mod. It's something we're proud of, and I love that. Like I think that's what you need for passion projects. You can't try to constantly be competitive with with not only with other projects in the community, but even your own previous projects. Like just create something that's fun, create something that you learn and upskill yourself with, and create something that pushes boundaries in your own personal growth.
For sure. That's amazing. That sounds awesome. That really sounds like you sort of came to the destination where you were meant to arrive as well. So yeah. Oh.
And so you're still doing the Minecraft stuff. Like I was kind of wondering if you had transitioned from the Minecraft modding into your current work, but you're still doing the Minecraft stuff. That's really cool.
It's interesting because I feel like I've tried to get away from it for as long as I can. Like I would say the past 4 years, I've just constantly been thinking like, when am I going to stop this? Because I guess, on a professional level, I don't really get much out of it anymore, but I just love the game. And I don't necessarily love the game as a game that I play anymore, but I love it for what it represents as a platform. This game is creative expression, almost personified. You get people who, even without mods, let's say you're just playing it and placing blocks and creating structures, the amount of crazy stuff people make, like just building things, and the servers and, the charities and all these amazing things that the community comes together to create, it blows my mind and it inspires me. And I think that's why I just still can't get away from this game. Even though I'm working in the industry and making games myself now, I'm like, I just still want to make mods because it's too compelling to me. There's something about that platform that I haven't seen. There's things like Roblox, right? Roblox has kind of a similar vibe to it in terms of people can create, maps and like mini games and stuff, but it's not the same. It doesn't feel like the community that Minecraft feels like. The closest thing that I can say that felt even remotely similar to it is probably Warcraft 3 back in the days, because people were, they created Dota, and that turned into League of Legends and turned into Dota 2 and Heroes of the Storm and all these other games. Like that was cool, and that had a similar vibe of just creativity. Let's just put out a bunch of things that we want to create. And I feel that with Minecraft to like 1,000 levels.
Yeah. It's no surprise as well that this year the game seems to be going through some sort of new renaissance period. Like there's been some news, coming out over the last couple of weeks where it's 10 plus years old now. And I think the stats just came out recently. It's been recorded that there's over 112 million people actively playing every month. Holy shit.
That's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
And it probably helps that PewDiePie's been playing it recently, and I think that's kind of like attributed a little bit to the spike in popularity. But I just think it's a game that I don't know when it will die. I thought it was going to die years ago personally, but it doesn't seem to be dying, and I'd love to know why. It is interesting. Like, I have my own theories. Like I said, it's a platform for creativity, and I think something as inherent as that can't die very easily. Yeah, it's like Lego, right? Like Lego is not dead.
No, and that's as much about the people sort of enjoying the product as it is about the product itself. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Nice. So so much so that you're hitting up Minecon next week, from what I understand. So what's going on there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually did a panel last year with a bunch of modders in the community, and we all kind of like we came together as a modding community, and we wanted to put forth a submission to do a panel. This is talking about last year, that is, and it was a bit weird, but essentially what happened is we just had a poll because so many different modders wanted to come together and represent the modding community. There's so many out there, and there's so many talented people out there, so we couldn't really find a way to choose. So we kind of just let the community decide. So we had a poll, and people voted, and I put myself in there because I was interested in representing the community, and I ended up getting chosen with a few other people, and we ended up doing a panel talk about essentially not only what modding is, but how it can empower your career and your skill growth. As it doesn't have to be as a young budding developer, but even just as someone who wants to just learn a little bit about programming, maybe a little bit about art, and just have fun with it. And we wanted to give that to especially the younger audience who kind of trying to get into this a little bit, but they don't know how to, or they don't know what mods can do for them. So not only can it can help them actually learn things, it's super fun. Mods are awesome. I don't think there's many games that I haven't played that I haven't tried to go looking for mods, because there's just a lot you can get out of it. You can customize and tinker your game to your personal taste, and so that was something that we wanted to talk about in that last panel. But this year we got invited back again, and we're gonna be talking a little bit about game design within Minecraft itself. So we want to kind of, again, to the younger audience, kind of get them a little bit interested in game design, and how can you do it? How do you start off? It's kind of an intimidating thing for people who maybe don't even know what game design is, or how to think about managing a project. So we want to give that to people. We want to inspire them in some ways. So that's what's going to be happening.
Oh, sweet. So Minecon sort of being the one time of year where Mojang will sort of come out and give a bit of information about plans for the game and what they're developing at the moment and that sort of thing. So I think last year we got information about the Village and Pillage update that they were working on, and stuff that's come out over the last year. So I expect we'll get a bit of an insight next weekend as to what else is coming up in the near future. Now, it sounds like you've not had a huge amount of involvement in vanilla Minecraft for a little while, but even so, you must have some sort of like internal wish list as to, like, if Mojang was to announce some big updates to the game or some new content, like what would be top of your wish list? Like what would you love to see in Minecraft that hasn't happened yet?
It's a really good question. So I see mentioned a lot this idea of an underground update,
Mm-hmm.
and I totally agree with it. But I think for me, as awesome as it is that Mojang is, working on these new feature additions and stuff, for me, what would be more of a priority is working on tools and platforms that allow people to create more and share more with each other. So again, I talk of Minecraft as this creative expression platform. I think that should be the focus more so than just adding extra features to the game, because extra features are great, but they get stale, just like a mod, and there are so many mods that get pumped into the game all the time. I'm not saying that Mojang shouldn't, work on these features, but I think maybe parallel to that, there should also be, for example, something maybe even similar a little bit to Orbis, where people are able to create new dungeons, just as designers and artists, and then they could share it to like a marketplace where people could just download these dungeons and add it to their game, and just like put a tick box and like, oh, now I've got new dungeons in my game.
Cool.
You don't really have anything like that in Minecraft, and that doesn't have to be mods. I don't think it should be mods. I think it should be a platform where people who have no idea what programming is can just create content for players. And there's a little bit of that in Minecraft Bedrock, which is like the console edition, and they have like a marketplace where you can buy maps and you can download maps and skins and texture packs and all that, and that's great. Go to the next level. let's make it more than that. Let's make it so you can add structures to your world. Let's make it so people can share new dimensions without even programming. Of course, there's limits to it because at that point, like you're just kind of making mods. But I'm not saying they should go for the whole idea of maybe like a modding API. I think it should be reserved to what we have now, which is people creating mods. I think it should be just more ways for people to share creativity.
Yeah, nice.
I know it's a bit of a cop-out answer because if I were to talk about the actual game design of Minecraft, I think it should just be way more about exploration. I think it should be... I love features that make you move far away and make you constantly think about being on the move. So something that I have a bit of a problem with in Minecraft is that they have beds. And beds as a mechanic is like not necessarily problematic for games in general. For Minecraft, the problem I have with it is that because it sets your respawn point, you're always tied to one location. And you're incentivized to stay in one location. You actually avoid danger by being inside of a house. You're never pushed out of your house. And I'm not necessarily saying there should be danger which pushes you out of your house. I'm saying that the allure of exploring and finding new, crazy, interesting things should be so much more of a priority for the player than avoiding danger. They should be going out of their way to face danger just so they can find these cool new places in the world. It should be pushing the player constantly. Like they should never be staying one place. That's just a personal thought of mine. I don't know, I mean, the problem with Minecraft is that there are so many different players with so many different tastes. And, there might be players who hate the idea of exploring constantly. But for me, that is my jam. I want to be finding new things all the time. I want to explore. I think that's part of the charm of Minecraft. That's why I loved it to begin with, because when I didn't know what was going on, when I was exploring in caves, that was exhilarating. That was amazing. Hearing, hissing sound in the distance and not knowing what it was and then dying. It was great. And I think they need more of that. They need more things that excite the player and make them get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it almost sounds like you could have like a whole new mode, maybe call it a Wanderer's mode or something like that, and make, instead of beds, you've got maybe like a camper's backpack, and you respawn maybe not exactly where you die, but maybe nearby, so that if you land in lava, you're not just going to respawn again straight in the lava, like something a slightly safer location nearby, but not too far away. So, yeah.
There's many approaches to it, and I love the whole idea of doing more game modes. I think that's probably the solution, because again, people love the classic Minecraft. I've heard plenty of people talk about how they wish it was more survival like it used to be, and maybe that's something they should consider. Maybe there should be some sort of game modes that appeal to these different player tastes, because the community is so large now, so you can't please everyone.
Yeah.
So you don't have to.
Well, if people want to play super survival, can recommend hardcore, which is what I've been playing.
Yeah, God.
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah. Well, anyway, not to sort of end things prematurely on the Minecraft stuff, but we do need to move on to other sort of topics, and I think this is a really good jumping on point to talk about maybe stuff that you play outside of Minecraft. So, launching into our games played recently, Brandon, what else have you been playing besides the Minecraft? Is there anything that's caught your eye that you've been sort of doing lately? I know you're a bit of a Blizzard fan in some sort of areas, but is that what you're doing currently? What else are you playing?
So I mean, I don't play that many games in the past couple of years, but when I do play a game, it's usually something that really, really catches my eye. So this is a bit of an old game, but something that I've loved in the past couple of years is actually a game from Frictional Games called Soma.
Yes.
You ever played it?
Love Soma.
Yeah, Christian's a big fan. I've not played it yet, but it's on my list for sure.
Yeah, so I love Frictional Games. I think what they do, if I were to be bold, I would say they're probably they're the company right now in the game industry that is pushing the concept of narrative-driven games and games that consider the agency of the player. I would say they're pushing it the most, even more than like AAA games and everything. I think what they're doing is really leading into something big. And I found with Soma, like that game like destroyed me. I thought it was just so compelling. And I just, without spoiling anything, of course, in case people, want to play it, just play it. It's Absolutely phenomenal. It's a technically it's a horror game, but there are complaints of people saying that it's not as scary as their previous game Amnesia, which I'm also a really big fan of.
They also did Penumbra, didn't they? I remember that being.
They also did Penumbra. Yeah, I only ever played Black Plague, I believe it was, which was that Penumbra and Amnesia are scary. They're scary as hell, and Soma is scary in its own way. But the thing that makes it different is it's scary for me. The concepts are scary. It's psychologically scary and
existentially scary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And God, I think that's probably, out of all the games I played over the past couple of years, that's like the only one I ever come back to think of. It's absolutely phenomenal.
I think of it as almost like the anti-Journey in some ways, like that place. Because it's like if Journey was set in the Upside Down from Stranger Things, kind of like twisted, and you're going almost along a linear path towards a destination, but everything that happens along the way, and it has a kind of opposite emotional trajectory to Journey.
Yeah. I mean, out of curiosity, Christian, like what would you say was compelling about Soma to you?
I love the sort of philosophical and existential questions that it grapples with, and I really like the kind of hands-off approach it takes to its storytelling. So it doesn't bombard you with audio logs and dialogue choices like overly much, and it kind of just lets you experience the environment of the game. And there's a lot of environmental storytelling in the game, and it's that kind of you feel like. Oh, and it's the sense of isolation that you get from the atmosphere. It's a very like oppressive atmosphere, literally and kind of metaphysically. And it just oozes atmosphere and tension, and it's just a good game.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's a good point. That like it's not. I think like as the environment itself gets more isolating, so do the concepts of just like existential isolation. It's I wish I could talk about it in more depth like as a game, but I don't want to spoil it.
So when I get to a quiet moment some evening where I absolutely hate myself, I should play this game is what you're saying.
Yes.
It's also not that long to actually play through. I reckon you, Luke, could play through it in maybe one sitting.
Oh wow, really? Okay. Interesting.
I know you can play some pretty extended gaming sessions there. So
yeah, we'll get onto that shortly. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, Christian, let's move on to you and talking about games filled with dread and horror themes. I think that probably ties into what you've been doing this week. So
so I finally got around to playing the Resident Evil 2 remake that came out this year, earlier this year, and I thoroughly love it. I knew I would. It was just a matter of getting around to it. But I won't. I think you played it, didn't you, Luke?
I finished 3 playthroughs of it earlier this year.
Yeah. So I won't go on about it too much because it has been covered on the podcast back when you played it. But yeah, I'll just say that it is a really well polished experience, and visually and from a design standpoint, I love the way the game looks. The RE engine is fantastic. I'm playing it on PS4 Pro on a 1080p screen. So what that does is it gives me 60 frames a second, but not 4K. And I generally will always favor frame rate over resolution. So I love that 60 FPS on a console. And it has a similar kind of enjoyment that I get from Metroidvanias. And like that survival horror actually, I think, shares a lot with Metroidvania games where you are traversing an interconnected environment, getting key items that unlock earlier sections or earlier sort of objectives. And I love that about survival horror. And I guess the one feature I wanted to talk about, it feels weird to go on about how much I love a map, but by God, the map in Resident Evil 2 is so good. The way that it like gives you so much information without sticking objectives right in front of you. So what the map in RE2 does is every room in the game starts off red, and as you complete each room, it marks them off blue. So completing means picking up every item and interacting with every key object in that room.
Yeah, cleaning it out essentially.
Cleaning it out completely, yeah. And it also, if your character visually looks at an item in the room, but you don't see it yourself, it will mark that item on the map so you can go and get it later. Every time you try a door in the game, if it's locked or unlocked, it'll mark that on the map. And so a lot of the time, there's a lot of wasted time in survival horror games where you're going back into rooms that you can't remember. You're double checking every corner thinking, oh, did I forget something? Can I not open this door because I've missed a key in a drawer, 3 stories down? And this map system is such a good way of not telling you where to go. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you what you've done, and it gives you clarity of what you've already done, and that makes the experience just so much more enjoyable for me. So
yeah.
So the original never had that?
The original didn't have that at all. The original had a map, but it was literally just these are how all the rooms connect together, but there's nothing about the items that you've collected or whether or not you've finished each room. So it really helps with the gameplay loop.
It's a really good feature when you play through from the other character's perspective the second time as well, because often those items are in slightly different placements, and what you need to interact within each room to sort of get the full clean sort of indicator on your map is different. So they make slight changes to kind of keep it fresh, and that's really important because otherwise you'd be coming straight through assuming that everything's exactly the same, and it's not. So yeah. It's real handy from that perspective.
I'm still going through my first playthrough as Leon, and from what I've read, the Claire playthrough doesn't change things as dramatically as it did in the original. In the original, there were quite a few divergent points in the game, and I've read that there's not as many, which is disappointing, but maybe because of all the effort they put into the game and the high fidelity of the game, it was a bit outside their scope to make it as different through Claire.
Yeah. But man, Konami still on that tear. Not Konami, sorry, Capcom.
That's Capcom.
Capcom's still on that tear. I always get those two mixed up. I should
for sure
cut my tongue out.
And then the only other thing I wanted to talk about was actually something. It's gaming adjacent, and that's I went to a networking industry summit today called the Extended Reality Education Summit. So I don't really talk about my work on the podcast much, but the science center I work for actually developed a virtual reality application for schools for teaching biology. And so we have kind of a game adjacent sort of area that we work in. And so I went to this Extended Reality Summit, which had people from Microsoft and HP and a few other, tech industry folk there. And there were some hands-on demos of different, mostly industry applications, so not really gaming. But the one thing that was cool was the Microsoft rep actually gave the first live demo in Australia of the HoloLens version 2. Yeah, so that was really... Yeah, so he went through the improvements over the first version of the HoloLens, and the second one has a much improved field of view, which was the biggest criticism, I think, of the first HoloLens, is that it from what I never got to try it, but from what people say, the actual field of view, it's like you were holding an A4 piece of paper at arm's length, is how it's described. So there's a small window that the AR projection actually occurs in, so it's not this kind of all-encompassing experience. But the HoloLens version 2 is about 3 times that size, so it's more like holding an A4 piece of paper like 12 inches away from your face. So much improved field of view. And then also it has full hand tracking. So you don't need to wear any gloves or hold any grips, but it just tracks your hands and your fingers through the hardware natively. It also has eye tracking, and it incorporates what they call the Azure Point system or something, basically the same technology that they're going to be using for Minecraft Earth, where like AR objects get fixed in place in the real world, and then you can come back later and they're still there, and it's a shared experience. So if there's an AR object that you place down, anybody else using that same application can still see that. So it gives a kind of fixed reality to the augmented reality.
Yeah.
And he just gave a little demo where he was like playing a piano in front of him and picking up things off digital shelves and dropping them on the floor and manipulating them. And it was really cool to see. And there's so many awesome gaming applications that could come from it. Yeah, HoloLens version 2, pretty cool.
So version 2, I'm assuming this is a developer sort of grade product. It's not consumer released yet, or am I wrong about that?
It's available for developers, and also there's industry applications for it.
Right.
So he showed off there's a bricklaying company of all things where they have a HoloLens application where it will project the wall that they're going to build brick by brick in the space that it's going to be built. And then their brickies can pop on the HoloLens and they see a template of where every single brick needs to go so they can lay them all down perfectly. So if there's like a fancy shape, if it's not just a wall, if it's like something more creative, then they have that template that they can just see in real life and just put the bricks where they need to be. So cool stuff like that.
Yeah, so that could be used for like tiling as well.
For sure.
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
I love when like they use something like that for more practical applications than, you know, just games and stuff. I mean, I imagine when it comes to the games, that's gonna be huge for education, and I'm excited for that personally. I mean, what do you guys think of AR and VR? Like, what do you see it heading in? You know, not just education, but even in games itself. Because VR is a tricky subject for me because I love the concept of it. Of course, it's still growing and it's trying to break out. But AR is like I have no idea what to expect. I think it could be gigantic, and it could also be another fad. But
I think it's just hilarious how like both of them, like ironically, given what we've been talking about tonight, have been so closely associated with Minecraft in recent years. So the HoloLens, I think most people kind of, you know, the original HoloLens demo that really blew up on the internet was when they showed that sort of gameplay with Minecraft at I think it was E3 about 4 years ago. But and you know, Minecraft is now available in VR, like for people who are playing using PC headsets. I don't know if it's available on consoles to do that. I know the VR version's free on PC.
I tried Minecraft VR on the Vive, and that was super interesting because another thing with Minecraft is that like a block is meant to be a meter tall, and so when you're playing in the Vive, everything is huge. A cow is like kind of like the size you'd expect a cow to be in real life, and everything just feels so foreign. It's like a completely different way to play the game. But Minecraft Earth, I haven't looked too much into it, but that's super interesting.
That's the other one I was going to mention too. Like in terms of game applications, I think that's going to be the next big notable sort of AR one that's going to take the world by storm. Because I mean, Pokemon Go blew up due to that. Even though a lot of people these days, I think, play it without the AR elements, they're sort of happy to kind of have the fixed Pokemon on screen without using the camera to show the natural environment unless they're doing photo mode. Because I think it's just a more reliable way to play the game for people who are on the go. I mean, Minecraft has definitely got that popularity behind it that when that launches and people are actually getting creative and building things, which is unlike how Pokemon's played because it's more about the collecting aspect as opposed to the creative aspect. I think people will go nuts for it. I really do. I think it'll be a big one.
What's interesting is that I saw some screenshots on Twitter, and it looks like you can collect like animals and stuff as well. So it's got that going for it. Like it's not just about the creativity. It's got that kind of Pokemon Go-esque collect all these things and these like special animals that I think there was like a special cow you could collect, and it could be just gigantic. I mean, it's got to be like just look at the demographic of Minecraft and how many people are playing every month. It's kind of crazy not to think that it won't be successful.
Yeah. So here's your definitely. Job for the next week, Brandon. Like when you're at Minecon, because they're undoubtedly going to have some stuff there about it. Like I want you to report back. Let us know.
I'll let you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Microsoft rep today was talking about Minecraft Earth just briefly, just to do with that they call it. Microsoft actually call it mixed reality instead of augmented reality because they make a distinction between augmented reality being stuff that's like overlaid over the real world but doesn't interact with the real world, and then mixed reality being like virtual objects that interact with real world objects, and that idea of fixing virtual objects in place is part of that. And he gave an example in Minecraft Earth of if you have an animal, or I think he said that if you have a pet, then and another player tries to attack it, you can actually like physically stand in front of it and block them from doing that. Like you can obscure the object from their device, which is something you can never do in like Pokemon Go because it doesn't actually attach the Pokemon to a point in the world that another player can interfere with. So pretty interesting.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's crazy. Like I can't imagine like this is really cool. Minecraft Earth to me is really cool from a technological standpoint. But what's more interesting to me is what comes next after it from this technology. Because, I mean, like, there have been games that have tried this whole idea of, like, fixed point objects in the world, but they've always been a bit shaky and they haven't really looked that good. But it looks like Microsoft are really nailing it. Like, they've invested a lot of resources into making sure this works well. And so now that this technology is becoming more standardized, what comes next? Surely, like, it's not just education stuff. Like, I want to see what games come out of this, and hopefully there will be a game market in AR or mixed reality, not just education. Like, as excited as I am for that stuff, there could be a possibility for maybe more people will just get outside and actually play these sort of games instead of I love my desktop gaming, but it would be cool to see that as an option.
Yeah. I legitimately think that the Lego company will get on board at some point and do something with these kinds of tech solutions, because I mean they've had pretty good success when it comes to stepping into video gaming in the past, and I mean granted a lot of that's very franchise linked to whatever the big new animated Lego franchise is at the current time, or what they've got deals with, but that they're more and more like with Lego Worlds that came out a few years ago. That's kind of a Minecraft-esque creative sandbox where they can kind of collect and build using Lego pieces and build up in that kind of way. They're always sort of looking at different ways that they can push the envelope when it comes to video games, and I wouldn't be surprised if they look at this as another opportunity. So yeah, which would be cool.
Did you guys used to play the old Lego games? Like, I think there was a Lego racing game. I can't remember what it's called.
The only Lego game I ever played was Phantom Menace, I think, like one of the early Star Wars Lego games. That's it. But that was fun.
I played a bunch of the Marvel ones because my kids have them, and they're really good. So
yeah, because I remember there was a really old PS2 Lego game where you played as a pizza delivery guy, and you'd have to deliver pizza while skating around a town. And for some reason, that was the highlight of my childhood. I loved that game. Oh my god, it's probably terrible, but
no,
I don't know. Lego, they've always had some pretty damn good games. And early on too, it's not just a recent thing. They seem to make games about Lego. Of course, it's got maybe you could do a bit of block building and stuff, but or brick placement and stuff. But the games themselves are actually well designed games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironically, they've actually stepped into board games and done a pretty good job on those too. I don't know if you've seen the Lego Heroica series, which is Hero Quest in Lego form. They're really awesome too.
Right.
Yeah.
But the kids are all playing Roblox these days, aren't they? Isn't that the latest thing? Roblox?
Oh, yeah. So that's what I mean. Roblox is interesting when you compare it to Minecraft, because from the outside it kind of looks like the same sort of thing, but it seems to be more about creating mini games and stuff, and there's a lot of that placement of objects and stuff, but it's not like Minecraft. It's not the same, and I think that's why it can still exist while Minecraft exists, because you'd think with something that looks kind of similar, you'd think it would just die, but no, it's pretty damn strong. I actually have a cousin of mine. He's pretty young. He's I think he's 8 years old right now, and he was recently showing me, because it was kind of funny. He actually played my mod for years, and then he found out that I made it, and he didn't know how to process that. But,
and then he turned around and spat on it.
Yeah, the mod sucks.
He was probably one of the kids complaining on the forums. But
you start getting death threats from your blood relative.
Yeah, but I found out that recently he just kind of showed me on his computer that he's been doing some Lua scripting for Roblox and creating these maps. I'm like, oh my god, that's so cool. It's really good that we have games like Minecraft and Roblox that seem to be educating people. It's not just a game; it's a platform that the people launch off of, and they're learning all these skills that are going to just be so important for them later in life. And I love that. I love games that are just more than just a game. Don't get me wrong, I love games like Soma, which are narrative driven, and they have their place. But it is also amazing to see games that can be more than that, just an entertaining experience. And I found that myself with Minecraft, and it's also awesome to see kids of the younger generation learning everything from this. I love it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of games that are more than just a game, how do you feel about games that offer real-world, tangible, physical rewards, Brandon?
Real-world, physical... All
right. Anyway, I'm going to jump into part 2 of a story that I started telling last week. So for anyone who was listening to the show last week, I was going through one of the most intense gaming quests that I've ever embarked on, which is to complete my Moments of Triumph seal in Destiny 2. So this is something that I didn't think I would be able to achieve given the amount of time that I'd left myself, because there was a clock running and I only had 2 weeks left to tick off everything I needed to do. And I think any sane person would have looked at the list of stuff yet to complete and decided, no, this is not feasibly possible, because as it turned out, I'd have to do, what was the math we did last week, Christian? It was like over 200 Crucible games and assorted other objectives and bits and pieces.
But then didn't you institute some sort of child labour policy to get around that?
Oh, no, not really. What Christian's referring to is that I did post a photo in our group chat of my son jumping on and playing a match, but that was more just a, yeah. I thought it was an amusing sort of, opportunity rather than actually physically getting him to do my work for me, because he couldn't do that. So, yeah, no, the task that I had was based on game completions as opposed to victories or anything like that. So I was able to have my boy Zach jump on and play a match and it wouldn't have, wrecked things. So I thought, why not? It's not going to hurt anybody. But anyway, I didn't think I'd be able to make it. As it turns out, I did. I completed everything with a full 25 hours to spare, which is not that much. Wow. But I think over the course of the last 2 weeks since I started chatting about this on the show, I have done like somewhere between 200 and 300 Crucible matches. I completed 3 raids over the course of 2 days, a whole bunch of other assorted objectives. I ran myself absolutely ragged getting this done. When I got to the point on, it was Monday evening that I finished off the last thing and sort of claimed all of the in-game prizes. I instantly jumped onto the Bungie website and ordered my my physical Moments of Triumph medallion, which is the thing that you are able to order once you actually complete the objective in-game. So I've now got that coming through the post as a keepsake of my achievement to have forevermore. I just felt like you'd think after that amount of effort, the first thing I would want to do would be to switch off Destiny and play something else. Funnily enough, the only thing I wanted to do is play more Destiny. So it was.
You're a madman.
It was the weirdest feeling, I could tell you. Yeah. But anyway, I did manage to pull myself away from that. And as it happens, I have also been playing some Borderlands 3, which just released last week. So I haven't sunk a whole bunch of hours into Borderlands 3 yet, but I do have some initial thoughts on it. Now, I'm not a huge Borderlands guy. Like, I played a little bit of 2. I haven't played 1 or the pre-sequel, so my game time is not going to compare to most of my other friends that are sort of, into the whole Borderlands thing, like Jam especially, who, long-time listeners of the show would recognize as one of our previous hosts. She's a huge Borderlands fan. She loves it to bits. She sort of has been hanging out for this game, whereas I'm kind of jumping in more from I think it'll be a good fun romp first-person shooter sort of run through. And what I will say is that it is a good game. I think that it's definitely a game that is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I know for a fact that it won't be yours, Christian.
Yeah, I know. I played quite a bit of Borderlands 2. I started to play Borderlands 2 like 4 times, but could never get all the way through it.
Yeah.
And a big part of that was the sense of humor just really not clicking with me at all.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, that doesn't get any better from my point of view in Borderlands 3.
Oh, no, it's more Borderlands. It is absolutely that. Yeah. So pretty much when you commence playing this game, you need to ask yourself at the outset, are you a poop guy or a boner guy, in terms of the level of humor that you want to aim for. So, yeah, it's weird.
So as someone who hasn't played any of the Borderlands games, it's probably like sacrilege. But like, how does it compare to the other games? Like, what is so different about it?
I mean, in terms of gameplay, it's definitely sort of come along a little bit from what I remember in Borderlands 2. And I think the way it approaches multiplayer in particular has seen some leaps and strides, because one of the things, it is a game that thrives when you're playing with other people, like a lot of video games do, to be fair. But that sort of shared experience where you've got co-op play with people going through and doing the run and gun and looting together, I think is a lot of fun. And you can do that with up to 4 players in this one, just like you could previously. But there's actually an option now with the way that loot is handled in game, because usually it was kind of like a shared loot pool where you would grab stuff as quickly as you could before your partner sort of grabbed it, and you couldn't share items. But now you can actually set your loot mode to be the traditional format like that, or it can be instanced so that you have your own loot drops and your partner has their own loot drops too, and never the twain shall meet. And if you set it in that mode, another benefit as well is that it actually sort of auto levels your enemies to match whatever you are. So that means that you don't have a downside to someone who's like a good way into the game, sort of, level 20 plus or whatever, jumping in with someone who's only a level 5 just getting started out, and the level 5 just getting constantly reamed by every enemy in the game, sort of being way over leveled for them due to them being dragged up by their partner. Now, whatever you fight will be an appropriate level for you. Kind of similar to how World of Warcraft works these days with, your enemies being instanced to your current level, even when you're sort of playing in zones with other players. So it seems that more and more games are doing this now. And I think that's hugely beneficial when it comes to the co-op experience, because it means that you're both kind of operating on the same level, but there is still a drive to kind of improve your gear sort of layout, and particularly because the guns in this game are just so varied in the way they work. Like, it's not always about something doing more damage straight up. It's often about like how fun it is to use and what other alternate firing modes it has, and aesthetically how it feels to sort of zap someone versus freeze someone versus burn someone, all these different options. So
yeah, it sounds like it's more about play style and giving, players freedom of choice versus, just, I can damage more.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way to summarize it, actually. But, so, I mean, general gameplay, I quite like the game. It feels very smooth. The art style isn't everyone's taste, but I quite enjoy it. I think it's very, very good. I will say that with the exception of a few kind of quality of life improvements that they've made, the game still very much feels like a game of a few years ago. Like, I don't know if the Borderlands franchise in general has aged as well as it could have, particularly when you've got other games out there, doing the first-person shooter thing, like, really well at a much higher quality. And, I mean, the fact that I've just come off Destiny 2 to play this is probably not going to have done it any favours either, so, because that's, kind of the gold standard at the moment. But, the characters and the humour, though, is the sticking point for me, because I think that the approach to comedy in this game is a real scattergun approach. Like, they rely on just the absolute weight of jokes and in-game sort of, references and bits of humor. I almost look at it as like it's the video game equivalent of either toxic Rick and Morty fandom or like Family Guy fandom, where there's just so much like thrown at you in the way of jokes that some of them hit, but a lot of it falls flat, and the sheer weight of stuff that falls flat is really noticeable. So
yeah, the way I hear that sense of humor described sometimes is it's the lol so random sense of humor, where it's just like, oh my god, that's so crazy, and that's just not really my kind of cup of tea.
It very much is. Like, a couple of things I like about it, like they have actually got a lot of tie-ins to the Tales from the Borderlands characters from the Telltale Borderlands series, which I love because that was a fantastic series, and I actually really appreciated what they did with that one because it didn't go. Like, there was some really excellent humor, and it wasn't that over-the-top sort of, poo-wee fart humor that you sort of get a bit more of in this kind of thing. But there's other sides to it too, which is just, like, massively cringy. Like, the villains in this game, like the arch-villains, the Calypso twins, are pretty much Borderlands versions of influencers. That's what they are. So, it's almost like kind of trying to lean into the thing that would have been humorous in, 2016, 2017. So, but it's not as edgy these days, if you get what I mean. So, yeah.
So what would you say is like a game in the past that has been like, that's the funniest game you've ever played, it's the most comedic?
Yeah. Like, I think it's probably aimed at people that are maybe 10 years my junior.
You're asking what is the funniest game we've played?
No, that's my question was.
In terms
what's
of
the funniest game?
The funniest game I've played. That's a really good question, actually.
Because you don't get many of them.
It's difficult
in
games. It's really difficult. Because timing is such an important part of comedy, and unless you're stuck in a cutscene, the timing is kind of hard to control.
I tend to think the ones that really impact me the most in terms of humor are the ones that don't try and do it constantly. They're the ones that are usually semi-serious and don't sort of, lean into the humor too heavily. But when they do, they nail it, sort of thing. Yeah,
it's a contrast.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, as a good contrast, to again point at Destiny 2, like there are definitely elements of that game that have humor, but they're few and far between, which means that when they are done, it's a lot more noticeable and they usually stick the landing better. Like Cade 6 as a character is a really good example of that because, sure, his dialogue is a big part of his humor, and when you've got Nathan Fillion sort of voicing a character, that's going to be what they lean into. But there's moments during the core story campaign, like in particular when Cade uses a bunch of chickens to run interference when they're, raiding the main sort of kind of end battle sort of site to sort of get the Red Legion to sort of, get distracted by the chickens while they infiltrate the base sort of thing. That sort of stuff's funny. Like, but it's not, they're not trying too hard, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at. It's funny because it's understated as opposed to,
subtle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Funny games, that's a good question. Should probably think more about that. I can't.
Yeah, honestly, I can't think of any myself personally.
I think the funniest stuff that happens in games is usually playing multiplayer with people and the stuff that happens between you and your friends rather than the game itself.
True.
At least that's the case for me.
Yeah. Actually, I'd also probably point to the Yakuza series if I had to mention a series.
Oh, yeah.
That's definitely got it. And that's kind of like weird sort of Japanese humor that is very over the top, but because it's contrasted with the rest of the game, which is that you're a super serious sort of mob dude who's like literally just beating people with your fists, it kind of works. So,
right, yeah.
But the contrast is kind of what makes the difference. But yeah, interesting. Well, anyway, that's what we played this week. Let's jump into some news.
Now it's time to hear some gaming news. Time for some gaming news.
So I wanted to chat a little bit more about Destiny in terms of the news because there was something that happened this week, and that is that Bungie released a vidoc, which is a mini video documentary they like to call vidocs. Which came out yesterday, I think, which actually had some information in there detailing their upcoming plans for Destiny 2 beyond the Shadowkeep launch, which is happening in the first week of October. And the thing that shocked everybody when this came out is that it seems that Bungie aren't actively working on Destiny 3 at all because they have a, from now, 5-year plan for Destiny 2. So 5 more years of content coming for that game.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I love it.
It sounds like games like Destiny are becoming, and a lot more games recently, becoming more like games that are services, or games as services rather than, again, being a series. And it's an interesting trend. Like, I'm not sure how much I think about it. I think it can be a really good thing because you get more of that like iterative community feedback that constantly loops back into the game and makes it exactly the game that players want to play. But it's also just such a different dynamic to what we've been used to for, years and years and years. And it's almost, it's a very MMO mentality, but for games that are not always necessarily very MMO. You get that with like League of Legends and stuff. Overwatch as well, like, is much more of a service than it is just a standard game that's just released and left out there. What do you guys think of like games as services and the whole concept of it? Do you think it's a good thing?
It's very hit and miss, I think.
Hit and miss?
Yeah, I mean, you've got contrast.
There's been some high-profile misses, like Anthem comes to mind recently,
right?
And Sea of Thieves, I'd make the case for as well. So I think that it became the kind of hot new thing, and too many AAA studios tried to rush out games as a service titles, and not many of them have succeeded, is what I think.
Yeah.
Do you think that's inherent to the concept, or do you think it's just because these companies didn't really nail it?
I think it's inherent. It's partly market forces about there not being enough room for some. When a game becomes a service, it's occupying more time than a shorter title. So there's a saturation in the market there that I think some games can fill. But also I think it's rush development and bit of short-sightedness with just trying to catch the trend.
Yeah, rush development's the biggest thing. And I mean, Anthem's the key example there. But I think if I was going to point to the 3 games that I think have been the biggest success in the games as a service arena at the moment, I'd be pointing to World of Warcraft, obviously, because that kind of heralded the way for most modern sort of games as services. And to this day, it's still the most successful subscription model-based one that we've had. And haven't dropped their price over the 10 plus years that's been going, which is amazing to me. And I'd also probably point to Warframe and Destiny 2. Those would be the big 3. I think there's others that have done a reasonable job sort of trying to crack into it. But as Christian sort of mentioned, there's a lot of sort of like a spike there in terms of rush development and big launch splash. But what they've failed to do is to keep up after that point. So, I mean, even the Division 2, which came out earlier this year, and had a roaring success when it came to, the release, launch, and the game's endgame, keeping people invested and in there for some time. Even that's had a massive drop-off in the months sort of following because they just haven't been able to keep the cadence of content up to the sort of expected level of people who jumped on. And, interest in that game has quite clearly dropped off to a certain point. They're still doing well with it. They're still adding content. They've still got a roadmap that they're working on. But compared to the other games that have been, much bigger successes, they've really nailed it in terms of the constant bleed of content that's coming. And I mean, even Fortnite to a certain extent has done pretty well with this, with their season approach. I think they're actually nailing it reasonably well. The amount of crunch that might be happening behind the scenes at Epic notwithstanding. So, yeah,
Are you guys? It's on topic, but are you guys Command and Conquer fans by any chance?
Yeah.
Back in the day, I haven't played a Command and Conquer game in maybe 15 years, but back in the day, I loved it.
Yeah. I used to have a big poster of Joe Kukan, who played Kane in the Red Alert series on my wall when I was a kid growing up. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a huge fan, but I assume you're a fan, or you kind of followed a little bit how they did the Command and Conquer Generals, and they kind of tried to make it a reboot of the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was that the mobile app?
No. So that was Command and Conquer. Oh God, honestly,
Generals,
I can't remember the name, but that.
No.
I can't remember, but it was a mobile game.
Right.
So there was Command and Conquer Generals, which is just that was kind of like a sort of like a modern warfare version of like Command and Conquer.
Was that the first person thing?
No. That's Renegade actually.
That's Renegade. Oh God.
I personally like Renegade, but that's an entirely different story. But there was Command and Conquer Generals, and that was a full RTS, and it was great. It was actually one of the most popular competitive games in the series. And then finally, after so many years and so many problems with some of the recent games, because they released Command and Conquer 4, which did really poorly because it was not really a proper RTS with base building and stuff, they announced Command and Conquer Generals 2. And they wanted to, first of all, make it very competitive. They wanted to make it actually quite a lot like StarCraft, which is kind of going, straying away from what Generals was. But the problem here was that kind of like mid-development, they randomly announced, first of all, it was going to be a reboot. It was going to be called Command and Conquer. And second of all, it was going to be released as a game as a service. It got canned eventually, but I think what I learned from this, and that series in general, and just games as services, you can't really start a game as a service. I think the only way or the strategy to actually make it work is make it a normal game and then transition or expand it into a service.
Do you know what it reminds me so much of? You're absolutely right. It reminds me a lot of these companies that sort of jump in with a game that they claim is going to be the next big esport, and similar sort of thing. Yeah. I just think it's the only way to do it. Like, I've seen so many games recently that have tried this concept, and they don't, again, as you said, Christian, like they just don't have the saturation. There's too many players out there, and a lot of them are actually absorbed into one particular game service. So how are these new game servers going to come in and try to, get those players to come over? It's just not possible. You need the player base first. So if you don't have the player base, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And that's what happened with Command & Conquer. And it sucks because the series is basically dead now. The only thing they have that, I don't know if you know about this, Luke, but they're remastering the original Command & Conquer and Red Alert 1. Yeah, I did hear about that. So
yeah, that's going to be cool.
I mean, remaster can go, many different directions depending on who's involved. You could end up with a Resident Evil 2, or you could end up with, something disastrous. But that mobile game we were trying to think of before is Rivals, Command & Conquer Rivals.
Oh, yes. That was it.
Apparently, it's not a bad mobile game. It's actually a decent mobile game. It's just not a Command & Conquer game. It's a game with a Command & Conquer skin. It just sucks. Like, I don't know why they do that, but it happens.
Money's why they do it.
It's money, but like, it's a terrible way to revitalize the series.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
It's like the Commander Keen game that they showed off at the last E3. It's like, who's the target audience for that? The people who have nostalgia for Commander Keen that will absolutely recognize, how much of a shill, the company trying to make this is, and they're just butchering like a time-honored franchise? Or is it for this new audience that have never heard of Commander Keen, so have absolutely no reason to give a crap? So, it's weird.
Completely hurts the brand.
Yeah.
Well, I hope Command & Conquer comes back, because I absolutely adore that series. It was like the game that got me into RTSs in general, and I have a lot of appreciation for StarCraft as well, but Command & Conquer and I guess Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 1 was like, that was that was the lifeblood of RTS for so long.
Absolutely.
I hope it comes back eventually.
Nothing's ever really gone, and everything that's old is new again. So
Yeah,
it'll
that's
come
true.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come back in movie form.
Yeah.
I've always wanted a Command and like a real serious movie about like the Tiberian Sun sort of era of narrative. I thought like that the environment and the idea of Tiberium coming in and certain factions fighting over this alien material.
Yeah.
I think that's an awesome idea. That could be a movie. But,
Sadly, the thing that I've always wanted, I don't think will happen now due to his declining health. But Tim Curry actually playing a Russian sort of general in absolute proper movie form would be my dream. But
yeah,
never mind.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah. Oh, Christian, what do you got for this week?
Yes. So speaking of stuff that was old and now is new, the Final Fantasy VII Remake got a new trailer that came out of TGS. So that's Tokyo Game Show, happened just over the last week. And Tokyo Game Show, it's never as huge as an E3 or a Gamescom. But for people like me who love my Japanese games, there's always a bunch of trailers that come out. And yeah, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is just looking so good. Every time they show it off, it just impresses me more. Did you guys watch this latest trailer at all?
I didn't see the full
Haven't had a
trailer. I
chance.
did see one thing about it though, which shocked me in terms of the quality of the remake and how much sort of attention they're paying to people, for the nostalgia, and that's the option for the combat system.
Yeah. So the combat system they've been showing off mostly is this sort of real-time action, but then they've announced that you can also play it in a classic like turn-based ATB sort of style, like the original, which is so extra. It's something that they really didn't need to do, because I feel like they did a good job at convincing people that this real-time approach was going to work and that it visually looks really cool. And I think most people were on board with it. But then to go and also say, you know what, if you want, you can go turn-based as well. I think that's, it's just taking it to a next level, and it shows how much passion they have for the project.
Yeah. So again, good example of remakes done right. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the trailers, it's shown off so many short little moments from the game that when you see them in the new trailer, they just adds so much more life to them. And they've been showing off a lot of the minor characters, and their new models that they've done up for the other characters are fantastic. And Tifa looks amazing, and she does pull-ups in a gym, and it looks fantastic. And yeah, I'm all about that.
Nice. Is Final Fantasy VII something you can take back, Brandon, or a bit before your time, or?
Yeah, see, I've never really played a Final Fantasy game. Yeah, unfortunately. The only thing that I do know about Final Fantasy is I kind of looked into what happened with the MMO. I don't know what it's called. Did you guys know?
There's two. There's 14, and 11 was an MMO as well. But it's probably 14 if you're reading about it.
Yeah, it's probably 14. So I kind of learned about how there was one point, because like apparently there were a lot of problems with the original design of the game, and then they planned to shut down the game and re-release it with a new design.
Realm Reborn.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I can't think of a better way to restart an MMO than that. Like,
Yeah.
I watched that cinematic, and that is the coolest thing ever, of actually experiencing the end of a world and then, like, actually having a narrative purpose to it, other than just saying, oh, the server's going to shut down in 30 minutes, like, come back in, a couple of days when the new game is out. Like, that is just, I love that. Like, actually putting a narrative purpose into it, and then also, not only does it add narrative purpose, it actually explains why, the mechanics are all changed now once you come back to the game with the Realm Reborn. Like, that was awesome. I don't even know anything about Final Fantasy, and I think that was a really, really cool decision.
Yeah, that's another thing that, like, they didn't need to do that, but by doing it, it just made it so much more, I appreciate that so much, that effort that they went to weave it into the story.
Took guts.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
definitely.
That was a gamble on their part.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative is that they just, rebooted it like normal, but I think that would have been, I think the risk, I guess there's a risk by doing that, and it definitely takes guts, but they don't really have much to lose, because they're going to get some drop-off in some way, either way, from, rebooting the game.
And that game's still going strong as well, 14. They're just about to launch a new, they call it a raid shell, that's based around Nier Automata, the Platinum game that was directed by Yoko Taro. And Yoko Taro is actually has written the story for the Final Fantasy XIV raid. So I haven't played Final Fantasy XIV myself, but I love Nier, and so I almost want to play through the entire game just so I can play through this raid, so I can see the Yoko Taro story.
Plus, Tom Holland's been doing ads for it, so why couldn't it be good?
Has he really?
Yeah, he has. There's another celebrity too that I can't recall off the top of my head, but yeah, like he was totally doing some commercials for it. I think it was Shadowbringers was the update, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that was the last big update.
Yeah. So it might be the one just before what you're talking about, actually, if I'm losing track of time. So yeah.
Speaking of lots of celebrities, there was lots more Death Stranding stuff as well at TGS. So there was the 7-minute briefing trailer, which was kind of explaining what the actual the objective that the main character in Death Stranding is actually all about. And then there was also the 50-minute gameplay trailer, which I absolutely did not watch because despite being interested in Death Stranding, there's no way I'm watching a 50-minute trailer, which is basically just spoiler for the game.
Yeah.
So
that game looks super interesting to me.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I did read a bit about what's shown in that 50-minute trailer and how it kind of unfolds this whole strand system that Kojima keeps going on about, and how it's basically like a fully fleshed out version of the asynchronous multiplayer from the Souls series. So they're famous for being able to kind of put down messages for other players, and you can see the ghosts of other players and where they died. And Death Stranding's just full of little asynchronous multiplayer moments. Like you can leave signposts, leave messages, leave like the remnants of your camp might appear in another player's game, or if you put it like a bridge over a river, then that might show up in another player's game.
Yeah. It sounded like even their footfalls, like sort of eroding paths into some of the areas, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really weird. Very Kojima.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all about it.
I really love that idea, though, of weaving in multiplayer aspects into a more single-player, story-driven game, while not kind of ruining or damaging the integrity of it being a single-player, story-driven game.
Yeah.
It's very like Journey-esque.
Yeah.
Like
it is a bit. Yeah.
Also gives you interesting capacity for replay later on too, because the world would gradually change over time. That you'd get a different experience when you do.
Theoretically, yeah. But I'm glad that it's not just like drop in, drop out with other players, because nothing ruins immersion more than like being in a story focused game than having some guy running around with named like Bong Smoker 69.
Yeah.
Or Kingbdogz or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to mention from TGS was the Resident Evil Project Resistance reveal. So I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when there was a tease for it, the new multiplayer Resident Evil game. And it is an asymmetrical horror game, kind of like...
Evolve.
What is Evolve, yeah. And there's been a few other...
Yeah, the Friday the 13th game, I think, was like that.
Yeah. So
Dead by Daylight, I think might be another
Dead
one.
by Daylight, that's it, yeah. So there's 4 survivors and 1 mastermind, and the mastermind kind of controls a lot of the environmental things, so he can spawn enemies and turn lights off, set traps, close and open doors, and then eventually he can actually take control of Mr. X, who's like the big kind of Terminator-esque zombie who you're forced to run away from. And then, it's definitely using the RE engine from RE2, so the game looks gorgeous. And I'll be keen to check it out.
Yeah, sounds like a game that'd be super good for streaming.
Oh yeah,
I have to jump on and play a bit of that. All right. Well, anyway, we're running long otherwise tonight, so we'll wrap things up there. But thank you very much for joining us tonight, Brandon. It's been awesome to hear about your experiences and your path into the games industry and everything that's entailed. So. Cheers for coming on and chatting to us. It's been a good time.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. This has been a pleasure. This has actually been really cool and interesting. Love these conversations.
Fantastic. Well, if people want to hit you up and get in touch or find out what you've been up to, where can they find you, man?
You can just find me on Twitter, Kingbdogz, with a Z at the end. That's pretty much the main source of social media where you can find what I'm working on now.
Yeah. absolutely. And I'll chunk a link up in the show notes as well. But you can find those show notes, of course, when we release every episode up on our main site at channelendgame.com, or hit us up with all the usual socials. So at Party Loaded Show on Twitter, just look for Party Loaded on Facebook, and email us if you want to go old-fashioned to mail@partyloaded.com. But you can find links on our main hub to the YouTubes and the Twitch as well for when we're on doing stuff there. But that's otherwise it. So, plans for games over the next week or so. I've got more Borderlands to dig into, and I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting about that's coming out in the next week that I need to go back and check my dates on. So, how many playthroughs of Res Evil are you going to do, Christian, do you think?
I'm just going to do the 2. I'm just going to do the Leon and Claire, and then I'll probably call it there.
Yeah, plenty of other things to divert your attention to. So, yeah. Well, Brandon, all the best for your Minecon appearance next week. So hope that goes well, and I'll pump you for info when you return on what's going on with Minecraft Earth and other fun stuff like that. Yeah,
we'll have many chats.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, apart from that, thank you everybody else for listening tonight. Hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back again in 7 days' time with another installment, but until then, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.